yeah, continuing on with our series on ritual, Buddhist ritual, and in particular the sevenfold puja. And I thought I'd quickly start by just giving a little bit of my experience of ritual, because it isn't something you come across sort of on an everyday basis, really. And just to say, when I first came across ritual, this would have been in Bristol quite a few years ago. I thought it was extremely odd indeed. I thought it was very weird. I did not like it. I sat purse-lipped through it, not understanding it and thinking everybody was being a bit odd. And if I'm honest, I thought they were being a bit pretentious. I thought they were saying things that nobody really understood. So just to say, I was like that for quite a while. And I mean, obviously everyone's going to have different reactions to it, but I don't think it's uncommon to find it quite strange at first. And it was a while until somebody, and I'm very grateful to, it was a Mogavadra in Ipswich, I'm very grateful to him, for just one day saying to me, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just do it and see what it feels like? Just like, try it. What have you got to lose? And I sort of thought, oh, okay. And so I did on that particular occasion. And I've never really looked back. Quite difficult to articulate what it was. But I felt very physically connected, actually, in a particular way, kind of stirred in a particular way. And since then, I've been very happy to engage in Buddhist ritual. So I just wanted to say that, particularly if it's you're very new to these nights, you're very new to ritual, maybe you haven't even encountered it at all before. If it seems really weird, then please don't worry. I think that's fairly natural. Then I also just wanted to say, in preparation for talking about the verses that I'm going to talk about this evening, I've been doing a sevenfold puja on my own in my room, just for like 5 or 6 days, I think. And I haven't done ritual on my own for quite some time. And I've so enjoyed dwelling in that beautiful world, actually, just connecting into that beautiful world. And where I live at the moment, I live on a very busy road and I'm on the street level. So I can see people's heads walking past as I'm sitting doing the puja, and cars are coming past all the time. So the world is living its full, crazy, busy life, like right in front of me as I'm doing the puja. And I've just so enjoyed that, sort of dwelling in this realm of the potential that we have, the potential that what is possible for us, this wider, bigger perspective. And at the same time as watching the world and the people go by. And it's felt very connecting to kind of hold the two together in a way. So yeah, and just to say, I don't know if it's been mentioned up until now, but puja, ritual, this sevenfold puja is a collective practice. And it's very good to do with other people, but of course you can practice it on your own. It's like meditation. You can practice meditation on your own, or you can practice it with other people, and it can be quite a different experience. But it's certainly a very valuable practice to practice it on your own. So I just wanted to begin with a bit of that, and then so yeah, let's dive in. We are at the heart of the sevenfold puja this evening. It's very exciting. So we've looked through, as the Midragosha sort of summarised before the tea break, we've looked at worship, so making offerings, sort of acknowledging the coming into relationship to our highest potential. Yeah. And sort of acknowledging and offering to that with beauty, essentially. And then the next fold is salutation. So bowing to that potentiality, I would say, sort of realizing that there is quite a gap between that potentiality and where we are presently, and sort of paying respect and reverence to that potential. And then last week we had Artapriya and Stephen talking about going for refuge. So essentially committing ourselves to realizing that potential, to practicing in order to become enlightened, actually to transform ourselves, to become more and more in line with that vision, with that potential, with our highest potential. And when we make that commitment, we also recite the precepts. So the precepts are 5 or 10 sometimes, but I'll stick with the 5 this evening. They're ethical guidelines of how we can live our lives, for how we can, it's not about being good or bad or being wrong or right, but simply helping us align our behavior and our vision with what is, well, true, essentially. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a bit. So we're arriving after those 3 folds. We're going to arrive at the 4th fold. And it's never occurred to me before, but the 4th fold is the heart of the puja. We're right in the middle of the puja. And it is entitled Confession of Faults, which, as Samudra Ghosh said before the tea break, is quite a, I think he's talking about confessions, it's quite a word. And confession of faults is quite a phrase. And I'm gonna look at that. I'm gonna look at that a bit. But it's the heart of the puja, and I think it's the crux of the matter, actually. We've recited the 5 precepts, sort of our aims in the spiritual life of how we want to behave. And we are seeing that we are not always behaving in that way. We are falling short, often quite continually. And it's not saying that we are terrible people. It's the practice of shining a light on our unskillful actions. And by unskillful, I mean those actions that come from a place of greed, hatred, or delusion. And so in terms of those 5 precepts, that would be acts of unkindness, acts of lack of generosity, discontent, lies, and all the various shades of untruthful communication and speech, and unawareness. And we will all, I suggest, act from that place, from those places, on many occasions. And it's the act of shining a light on that, taking responsibility for our actions, and then resolving to act differently. And this is to do with the law of karma. So the law of karma, I'm going to put it very simply, in saying that skillful actions result in happiness, unskillful actions result in suffering. And it's not that we're being told this is how it is. Skillful actions equal happiness, unskillful actions equal unhappiness. It's actually very much, look, these are the guidelines. Try it out and see what you think. See if this is true. See if skillful actions result in happiness and unskillful actions result in suffering. What it isn't, and I think the word confession is so loaded in our society, particularly if you have been brought up in a Catholic faith. Even if you haven't, actually, I wasn't brought up in any particular faith, but the word confession is strong, and it makes me think of Catholic confession, and it makes me think of kind of going secretly into a dark place and sort of telling somebody who has the power to absolve my sins, you know, to sort of forgive me and take away my guilt, I guess, for having committed those sins. And actually, it's very important to say that guilt has absolutely no place in Buddhism. Bhante says, where is it? Guilt implies offending a higher power to which you are emotionally dependent. Guilt implies offending a higher power to which you are emotionally dependent. And we do not have that kind of higher power in Buddhism. So we are confessing our faults. I'm going to go through the verse in just a minute or so. We are confessing our faults to the Buddhas, but not because they are not administrators of the law of karma. They are not there to judge on how we have been behaving. I think you could say they're masters of the law of karma. They've kind of cracked it. They've worked out the conditionality, the system, and they've become enlightened beings. And they're just wanting us to evolve to that place also. It's like, I kind of see it as like they're there going, come on, like encouraging, like, yeah, okay, come on, this is the process you need to go through. You need to bring these things into awareness. You need to shine a light on those unskillful actions in order to transform them. They are there with absolute kindness and compassion and wanting us to evolve to our full potential. Yeah, so I'm going to just read through the verse of Confession of Faults. And yeah, it doesn't beat around the bush. So Confession of Faults. The evil that I have heaped up through my ignorance and foolishness, evil in the world of everyday experience, as well as evil in understanding and intelligence, all that I acknowledge to the protectors. Standing before them, with hands raised in reverence and terrified of suffering, I pay salutations again and again. May the leaders receive this kindly, just as it is with its many faults. What is not good, O protectors, I shall not do again. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of things in there. I'm going to start with the word evil. You may have noticed it's there on several occasions, and it's a strong word. It's a very strong word. In this context, the word evil is referring to acts that stem from greed, hatred, and delusion. It's talking about unskillful actions. Now, I have no idea why Bhante Sangha, the man who founded our movement, he wrote this verse, and he would have chosen his words very carefully. He was a man who would never just idly put a word in for the sake of it. I imagine he's used the word evil for the strength of its meaning. I think there is something about the word evil that it certainly makes me sit up and take notice. And I'm going to talk about a little bit more about that in just a bit. I'm just going to keep going through the verse. So it then says, through my ignorance and foolishness. Now, ignorance here isn't talking about being stupid. It's talking about unawareness, simply just not knowing, not realizing. And then foolishness, which I feel I can particularly relate to, is when you're despite being aware, you still don't apply it. I feel like, yes, I can relate to that. And then it goes, and all that, so all those faults, all those unskillful actions, I acknowledge to the protectors. And I love that line personally, because it's Like there's nothing to hide. There's nothing that needs to be kind of swept under the carpet, that cannot have a light shone on it, and therefore cannot be transformed. We have a practice. So we have the verse is a confession of faults, and within Triratna and the rest of it as well, I think, there is the practice of confession. And you can do that with a friend, or you can do that in a group of people where you openly speak about ways in which you feel you've been unskillful. And you have a chance to kind of explore that with other people. Think about how you might make amends, apologize if apologies are necessary, and then thinking about how you might behave differently in the future, how you might do something differently. And that's an extraordinary practice, I think, because first of all, it makes you realize that it's not personal. Like, we're all got our conditions. We will all be at times behaving from places of greed, hatred, and delusion. It's simply the human condition, actually. And I think the more that you engage in that practice, the more you realize the less you need to kind of take it on yourself in a particular way. You can work with it, of course, and take responsibility for it, but it's not the end of the world. You're not a terrible person. You're just another person in the Sangha who's working with their stuff as best they can. And so then, of course, there is the line in the next thing, standing before them with hands raised in reverence and terrified of suffering. And again, that's a really strong line, terrified of suffering. And I can imagine that that can bring up all sorts of things, particularly if you have a very sort of strong religious upbringing. And I think in some ways, it's a really good word, because I think terrified of suffering, in a way, you know what, if we were a bit more, well, maybe I'll speak for myself, if I was a bit more properly terrified of the consequences of my unskillful actions, I'd probably be putting a lot more effort into working with them, actually. And I think I probably would be a bit closer towards enlightenment than I am now. And I think there is something in these lines, you know, using a word like evil, using the word terrified of suffering. It's like, do you know what? This is important. This is, if we don't pay attention to this, we will not be able to transform and reach that higher potential that we've sort of realized at the beginning of the puja that we're really yearning for, we really want. And the suffering isn't, again, as I've said before, the suffering isn't punishment meted out by the Buddhas. It's simply a natural consequence of the law of karma. It's a natural consequence that if you behave unskillfully, there will be suffering to follow. There's no external force inflicting suffering on us at all. It's simply an unawareness in the way that we behave, that we create our own suffering. And then may the leaders receive this kindly, just as it is with its many faults. What is not good, O protectors, I shall not do again. And this is, in some ways, I've really struggled with this last line for quite a long time, because I find it quite hard to say I shall not do again, kind of in the full knowledge that, well, you know what, chances are I will be doing this again. It's like I can't guarantee that I'm not going to be doing it again. And I think this is somehow linked to Arta Siddhi was talking in the first couple of weeks about playing. You know, there's something about the puja that's kind of setting up these conditions for us to act as if, to sort of rehearse in a way what it would be like to have reached this full potential, what it would be like what would it be like to just be able to say I shall not do again and be confident in that. That would be something quite extraordinary. And again, I just wanted to say, so my own experience of the practice of confession and kind of thinking about ways in which I've been unskillful. It's not that I'm doing it because I've been bad. or I've done something wrong, or I shouldn't behave in that way. It's very much linked to my own suffering and realizing that these things keep coming around again and again. And more often than not, once I've confessed something quite a number of times, because it tends to be the same things that come up again and again, I'm just sick of doing it. I'm so desperate to be free of it. So it's not that I want to behave in a particular way because that's how I've been told I should behave. It's because I want to be free of that limited, unconnected, unaware behavior. And it's really important to hold this verse, well, all verses, everything, but particularly this verse, I think, to hold it with an awareness of our own tendencies. So if you are somebody who has a tendency to beat yourself up, give yourself quite a hard time about things, this is not another stick to beat yourself up with. And it's really important to keep an awareness of just not letting that happen. Just not letting that happen. Yes, the words are strong. The meaning is essential, actually, for our practice, I would say. And the strength of the meaning is essential for our practice. And we can notice our responses to the words. And if evil and suffering do not immediately motivate or connect us, then one thing we can do is just really reflect on the meaning of those words. And perhaps we might write our own verse in order to sort of connect us in with it. And I just thought I'd share, quite randomly, I found in a book that I was looking at to prepare this really old bit of paper, like it's got yellow down the sides of it. And I think I must have written this. I apologise if actually this is something someone else wrote and I just wrote it down. But there's a lot of crossings out, so I think I wrote it. It's so weird. It's on the back of an old answer sheet from a quiz we did as a fundraiser for it. It's such a random bit of paper, but anyway, I found it. And this is, I believe, what I've written in my sort of way of connecting into this verse. I've called it Admission of Unskillfulness. Through the veil of greed, hatred, and delusion, I have behaved unskillfully again and again in thought, word, and deed. I acknowledge to myself, my friends, and the Buddha the nature of my unskillful actions. I will have to bear the natural karmic consequences my unskillful behavior will cause myself and others. I ask that this is received with kindness. I ask myself, my friends, and the Buddha to witness and support my clear intention to behave with skillful, kindly awareness from now on. So it's really, yeah, particularly I think if you do find the wording problematic, do reflect and sort of think about how you might connect in with it yourself. Or also there are many other pujas. So the sevenfold pujas are really important ritual for us in Triratna. And there are so many other pujas with very different wordings for the confession section. So I think it's really good to sort of look at how we can connect into this practice. Okay, so how am I doing for time? Okay, going to get a wriggle on and go to the next fold. So we've made an awareness of our faults, we've sort of confessed them, we've apologized if we've needed to, and then there is this possibility of just putting it behind you. And certainly I've experienced a feeling of real freedom and lightness once you've sort of gone through this practice of shining a light, shining awareness, and setting an intention to move on and do something different. And that naturally then leads to the rejoicing in merits, which is the next fold, the fifth fold of the sevenfold puja. So I'm just going to read that out. Rejoicing in merit. I rejoice with delight in the good done by all beings, through which they obtain rest with the end of suffering. May those who have suffered be happy. I rejoice in the release of beings from the sufferings of the realms of existence. I rejoice in the nature of the Bodhisattva and the Buddha, who are protectors. I rejoice in the arising of the will to enlightenment and the teaching, those oceans that bring happiness to all beings and are the abode of welfare of all beings. Very beautiful verses. I really appreciate the way that it begins with in the good done by all beings. So it's beginning very much at our level. So all of us rejoicing in all the good that is done by all beings, and then moving up again into that bigger perspective, that extraordinary potential of the good done by the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas, and all that is possible within that, and the oceans, the Dharma, the oceans that bring happiness to all beings and are the abode of welfare of all beings. So again, it's expanding back out into that big, beautiful picture. And I listened to a talk by somebody called Buddha Shanti. I think he was in Manchester, but he did a talk on rejoicing in merit. And he said this, he said, good actions are like bursts of light shining through the veil of ignorance and delusion in the world. I really, really liked that. And this verse is a celebration of those good actions. Good actions are an expression of reality. I'm not going to go into that, but I think it's good actions are an expression of reality. Feel free to contemplate. And it's such an enjoyable thing to do, rejoicing in merits. Again, like confession, rejoicing in merits is a practice that we can do. And I think it's a practice that is as valuable as the practice of confession, actually. Recognizing and owning our own qualities. And I think, well, I think we can safely say the English are notoriously self-depreciating and not very good at just kind of owning our own qualities and skills, and like we just rather not have to do that. Yeah, there's this kind of like, oh no, don't do that. Or if somebody sort of says, oh, you did that very well, it's like, oh no, like you'll find an excuse, like, oh no, oh, it was because of this, or just kind of owning our own qualities, in a way taking responsibility as much as for our unskillful actions as our skillful actions. And this can really enable us, certainly in my experience, enables us to just embody those skills and those qualities and those acts that are coming from a skillful place, embody them more and more. And I wanted to give a little example from a story that I've heard from Arthur Siddhi about Ratnagosha. Now, many of you will know Ratnagosha, and just to say, I did check with him that it was all right to tell this story. So we have we sort of regularly rejoice in people's merits, and particularly around birthdays. And I believe, well, I think it was in the community that this happened. If it wasn't, it was at the centre. But anyway, we'll go for the community for the sake of the story. I believe it was Ratnagosha's birthday, and everybody in the community where he was living with Arthur Siddhi and Ratnagosha and others rejoiced in his merits, and I imagine they rejoiced in him very fully. And anybody, if you don't know who Ratnagosha is, I think it's quite important at this point to say he is a man of extraordinary unassumingness, very sort of quiet on a particular level and very gentle. I would almost say humble, actually, but humble in a particular way, which will probably become apparent. So he was rejoiced in, and he went off, and then the next morning he came down and he said, I think you missed a couple. And I just loved that story. As soon as I heard that story, I just thought, that's fantastic. And it's because he takes the practice of rejoicing in merits very seriously. So he will have gone away and reflected on what people had said to him and kind of taken that on board, and then reflected on his own qualities and thought, actually, you know what, you've missed a couple. And there would be no trace of anybody who knows Ratnaghosha will know, there would have been no trace of kind of bigging himself up or big-headedness in that. Simply kind of owning, taking responsibility for his own qualities. And I think it's acknowledging that potential in us. The more seriously that we can take our skills and our qualities and our acts of goodness, the more we can own it and bring it for the benefit of others, for the benefit of everybody. And it's such a lovely, another thing that's lovely about rejoicing in merits is somebody once said to me, I was saying to them, oh, it was a particular quality that I was really appreciating them. And they said, well, actually it was Amoghavajra again. Thanks, Amoghavajra. I rejoiced in Amoghavajra's merits. Not only did he get me to let go into a puja, but also he pointed out that if you can recognize a quality in somebody, that means you have it in yourself. You could not recognize that quality unless you had it potentially within yourself. I always remember that. I often say it, actually. But I think it's really important. And it's a real sign that it's possible to develop that within yourself. And it's such an inspiring practice as well. It's like a bit like, you know, in this verse, in the puja, we're beginning with our good actions, and then, you know, they build into the actions of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And then there's people who we really look up to and respect. I mean, I think Ratnaghosha is somebody I really look up to and respect, and he's got so many qualities that I would love to develop. And yet I can have confidence, actually, that I have those within me and I can develop them because I can see them. And the practice of rejoicing just brings those out, brings those, those sort of bright light shining through the veil of ignorance, and just makes them shine brighter and brighter, and helps us all connect and embody with them more and more. That is the beauty of the Sangha. Rejoicing in merits. I mean, you could rejoice in your own merits. And actually, maybe that's a practice that we should all do a bit more often. Never thought about that. But it's a collective practice that we do as a Sangha. And all those lights and sort of bright shining acts coming together, and we're kind of inspiring each other to develop more and more in our potential, into our potential. Okay, so I'm going slightly over time. I've just got one last thing to say, I think. So I think we can connect when we recite the verses, these verses in the puja. We're shining an awareness on our unskillful actions that are keeping us from realizing the truth. They're keeping us from sort of being fully in that state of enlightenment. But they're not keeping us from it in that we've got to get rid of them, like push them away. We have to transform them, those energies. We have to bring them into the light and really kind of take responsibility for them, own them, and transform them, and bring them onto the path in order to reach our full potential. We cannot do it by cutting bits of us off. And then we're collectively rejoicing in our skillful and beautiful qualities, our gifts, in ourselves and in others. And that can inspire us and can keep us transforming to ever higher and more developed and evolved states of being. So I'm gonna leave it there. So that is well, it is what it is. It's a bit of an introduction to Confession of Faults and Rejoicing in Merits. What we will do now is we'll go into groups, I think until maybe 20 past, so for a quarter of an hour. If you would like some questions to ponder, feel free to talk about anything you like in your groups. Any responses, reactions, thoughts you've had on what I've said. But if you would like questions, so how do you respond to the confession section of the puja? It might be completely new to you this evening, in which case it's perfectly fine to say, I've got no idea what's going on. You know, you may have just heard it for the first time. Does it make you feel lighter? Does it make you feel heavier? Any thoughts or responses you have to that? And rejoicing in merits, is it something that you practice? And how do you feel when somebody rejoices in you? How do you feel when somebody rejoices in you? So let's go into groups. And what will happen when we come out of our groups is that we will go back to the theatre, and I think Arta Siddhi is going to lead us for the last bit of the evening in, if we've time, a short plenary, but if not, we'll just go straight into a little bit of ritual around those verses and chanting a mantra. So let's go into our groups now, and we'll come back together at 20 past.